Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service with you on the 16th of December. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information at 1-800-472-0391, the Alaska Weather Information Line in service for you anytime. Weather.gov/Alaska is your online access to all of our weather information, whether it's your forecast for around Anchorage, Northwest, Southwest, Southeast, or the interior. You'll be able to find your information in just about one click. Find general aviation weather information. The Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center has all of their river gauges and ice information there as we go, and ice thickness and snowfall as well. Really interesting stuff. And of course, the Alaska Sea Ice Program, pretty important stuff right now. The analysis that we'll have later on in the marine section comes from their webpage, and you can certainly check that out and make your own maps as well and check out some of the ice thickness and how that's been moving over the course of the week. Pretty impressive stuff. A lot of new information there for you later on in the show. As always, if you can't find what you're looking for, let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov is an easy way to find me. The focus for active weather for the rest of tonight has shifted for southeast over into south central Alaska, where snow will be falling for most of the evening and overnight hours. So as winds continue to improve in southeast, we're still looking at some snow around Haines. It looks like Haines area and the Klondike Highway especially has picked up about 17 inches of snow there. But the focus for all that storm energy now is moving into south central. So as we get up toward Thompson Pass, we'll start there. A snow and blowing snow advisory there. Winter weather could bring about 6 to 10 inches of snow probably before the midnight hour. Gusts to about 30 miles per hour could really produce some poor visibility, and it's not the worst it's going to be in Thompson Pass, but it's approaching some of those levels there. So an advisory is in effect there until midnight for Thompson Pass for 6 to 10 inches of snow and gusty winds, poor visibility there. Now, if you're driving from, let's say, Turnagain Pass south or north to Seward, you should expect some similar conditions there. We're looking at about 6 to 15 inches of snow, probably before 9 o'clock tonight. North winds there gusting up to 30 miles per hour will reduce visibility in that area between Seward and Turnagain Pass. But we're also expecting to see some pretty difficult conditions there between Kenai and the Turnagain Pass area. So as you're driving from Kenai generally northward, you're going to see about 3 to 8 inches of snow. Southwesterly winds there coming in around 30 miles per hour will likely produce some pretty poor visibility. And Homer's also been getting some snow as well, but the most snow will probably occur north of Kenai. Again, 3 to 8 inches of snow in that general area. Winter weather advisory for the western Kenai Peninsula until 5 o'clock in the morning. A little bit further north, right under the dot here, is the Anchorage Bowl. We're expecting about 4 to 8 inches of snow in that area. And as that is coming down on and off fairly heavily right now, expect that most of that will be done as we get into the early morning hours, about 6 o'clock tomorrow. So an overnight snow occurring. Plan accordingly if you're watching and planning to drive into the area tomorrow. And from Talkeetna southward along the Parks Highway, 5 to 8 inches of snow is possible. So the southern Susitna Valley expected to see about 5 to 8 inches of snow. That'll wind down as we head into the early morning hours tomorrow as well. So a fairly good opportunity for snowfall where you are in south central Alaska, in just about every nook and cranny there. One exception is, while it may snow around the Matanuska Valley, we're not expecting to see generally higher amounts in that area compared to what we're seeing for the area shaded in yellow. So the focus there in south central tonight for snow. Now, of course, that is probably not where you live. So as we look at the bigger picture, low pressure is working across the north and eastern Gulf. And as that is bringing in some drier air, we're starting to see an end to the rain and snow across southeastern Alaska. The overall location of this low pressure system, though, again, is focusing a lot of that storm energy across south central Alaska in waves of snow. Up north, moisture is working into the central and eastern interior as well. We should expect to see snow across some of those regions in the upper Tanana Valley as we go into tonight and into tomorrow. Up north, you can see the cloud cover still working generally from east to west. There's certainly plenty of cold air there. And this is all wrapping into that northerly flow coming down the west coast of Alaska that has been proficient and very efficient in producing more sea ice across the Chukchi Sea, closing that off and working ice into the Bering Strait and around St. Lawrence Island and around Little Diomede Island. So some big improvements there if you've been looking for ice, and a lot of growth across some of the western areas as well. We also have new sea ice around Turnagain Arm and Kinnick Arm and areas around Chignik and Kashamak Bay. So a lot, or Kamishak Bay, I should say. So a lot of new growth there thanks to the continued cold weather. A look out west, you can see circulation here just north of Shemya. That is a sign of a little bit of a new change coming in across the northern and western sections of our area in the western Bering Sea. With this low pressure system gradually working its way into the Gulf, we'll have a new player coming in from the North Pacific, and you'll see that showing up toward Monday night and Tuesday. In the meantime, a 969 millibar low sitting across the central and western Gulf of Alaska, periods of rain and snow across southeast, and a tight pressure gradient last night. That is easing up as we head into the evening hours tonight. So there will be some strong gusts, still looking at gales across the eastern and northern Gulf, and we're going to see some of that across the north and western Gulf as we head into today and tonight. But low pressure sitting across the Alaska Range and also moving just east and south of Homer, helping to be a pretty efficient snowmaker for most of south central locations tonight. Also looking at snow across parts of southwest and the Alaska Peninsula, but an added bonus there, if you're in Perryville or Unalaska or Nikolsky, you're probably looking at a very small chance of seeing at least a little bit of ash tonight because of any Eminoff near Perryville, and Cleveland a little bit closer to Nikolsky and Unalaska. So the wind directions there could create some very minor ashfall in your area. Not expecting too many issues there, but again, pilots have been notified, and you should be too, just in case you need to take precautions. A forecast for tonight. We're looking at shower and thunderstorm activity generally across the central and southern outer coast of southeast. Most likely rain for most locations, snow in the northern half, and it will still snow up around Haines there. Low pressure working its way across the western parts of Prince William Sound will be an efficient snowmaker for many parts of south central, and you can see that trough of low pressure extending up into the eastern interior. With that, snow is expected from Fort Yukon and Eagle northward up toward Kaktovik as a trough of low pressure lingers there just across the demarcation point waters and eastward. Out across the west, this is a northerly flow, and so we're looking at generally more lighter, more spread apart snow showers, but there will be the opportunity there across the lower and middle Yukon, Nunivak Island, northern parts of the Yukon Delta, the Alaska Peninsula, all the way along the chain. As weak high pressure is trying to build there, it's not going to do such a great job, but it is helping to bring in that northerly flow down the west coast, and again, keep that cold coming to get western Alaska and the Bering Sea closer to what we should be for this time of the year. Low pressure is dragging a front across south central and slowly and surely into the eastern interior as this continues to kind of reorganize and reset itself. We're getting that colder northerly flow down the inlet, and you'll see that in the marine weather charts here in just a few minutes. But the frontal mechanism is one that allows the clouds and the snow to form fairly efficiently along that boundary, and we're going to see snow flying across parts of the Glen into the Copper River Valley there. And we're also going to see another surge of some moisture working its way into southeast. Now, while this one won't be quite as intense as the last round, I do expect periods of rain and snow, with snow more likely across some of the northern locations of the Panhandle. You'll notice low pressure just south and west of Haida Gwaii at 965 millibars. So mariners, keep an eye on this. If you've looked at any of the Canadian Weather Service's information, you'll notice there's still gales to sometimes strong storms very close to Haida Gwaii. So keep that in mind there if you're planning your trip southward. And across the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain, you're still looking at snow showers and north winds on top of the threats for some very minor amounts of volcanic ash. For Tuesday, here's that next weather player I was talking about. You can see the boundary coming in across the western Bering. Low pressure, not terribly strong, but there certainly is a steep pressure gradient there across the Bering. High pressure close to the Gulf of Anadyr, continuing that cold northerly flow down the west coast. Snow showers from St. Lawrence Island and Diomede all the way down toward Nunivak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. We'll probably see a little more drying here around Kodiak Island, but it may certainly be blustery around Shelikof Strait. And pockets of blowing snow around the Alaska Peninsula should be expected, with continued waves of light snow around south central. Low pressure will park just west of Yakutat and east of Cordova at 981 millibars. And low pressure is organizing once again across the eastern Gulf, giving us a steady south and easterly flow right into southeastern Alaska, which probably means another chance for snow and rain for you. Let's take a look at temperatures in the morning. We're looking at 30s and 40s for southeast. Prince William Sound in the 20s and 30s. Some of the warmer spots there around Cordova all the way out toward Valdez. Teens and 20s for the Cook Inlet region, 17 in Kodiak, 10 below in Fairbanks, more like winter for you, 15 to 30 below around the North Slope. Shishmaref looking at 13 below, 8 below in Nome. Southwestern locations back to about 10 to 20 below, including Bethel at 19 below. 6 above in Nunivak Island, 18 above for St. Paul, and looks like most of the Alaska Peninsula will be in the teens and 20s. Dutch Harbor, Unalaska, about 26. A high temperature there tomorrow near 31, 25 in St. Paul, 5 for St. Lawrence Island, Gamble and Savunga included, 18 around Makoriak, 8 below around Utqiagvik, 4 below around Kaktovik, and you'll see places like Fort Yukon at 0, 20 in Eagle, 2 in Northway. Talkeetna looking at temperatures near 25, 2 in Fairbanks, and temps in the 20s and 30s for South Central.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your flying weather now. We expect widespread IFR across southeastern Alaska, the northern Gulf, the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, most of the Anchorage, Bull and Susitna Valley, and west of the Alaska Range into parts of southwestern Alaska. Generally the upper Kuskokwim and the lower parts of the Yukon Valley, generally south of the Yukon itself, and then north of the Brooks Range, a smaller area of IFR that may expand in the morning a little bit. Look for marginal conditions as we get into the North Slope, most of the coastal areas there, and really most of the capes for southwest and western Alaska, including the Bering Strait and all of the Aleutians in the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island. As we get into Monday afternoon, you'll see some marginal breaks there in the central parts of southeast, but north and south will continue with IFR. IFR lingers around the Copper Basin as well as the Wrangell-St. Elias region up toward Yakutat, and you'll see marginal breaks around the Kenai Fjord, Seward Peninsula, or Seward area, and into Prince William Sound, with IFR lingering around the western Kenai up to the Anchorage Bowl and the southern parts of the Matanuska and Susitna Valleys. Marginal conditions continue north of that, and then a widespread area of IFR expands east of Norton Sound for Unalakleet all the way up toward the White Mountain area and into the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, and even over that, pushing into Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. I look for marginal conditions for most of the North Slope, but Anaktuvik Pass looks to be IFR conditions there with areas around Utqiagvik, around VFR probably. Look for some breaks across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and just east of the Pribilofs, a patch of IFR will continue. That should improve by Tuesday morning, but we'll keep IFR concerns across the North Slope into the Kotzebue Sound region and still across the interior of the Seward Peninsula. East of that, you'll find more VFR breaks and some of that getting very close to Fairbanks, but south we expect to see IFR lingering around the Anchorage Bowl and northern Cook Inlet. MVFR expands across the northern Gulf and will keep IFR close to southeast. By Tuesday morning, we may see some improvement in the north, but look for marginal concerns down to the south, and then more widespread marginal as we get into the afternoon for southeast. Some of that still lingering into Prince William Sound. VFR improvements around the Copper River Valley all the way down through the Kenai Peninsula, but very close to the Anchorage Bowl and Kenai, we'll see marginal concerns. Most of that covering the interior in the north and western coast. The west coast will have a stripe of IFR extending southward out of the Bering Strait into the Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas and Nunivak Island, and also across the western Aleutian chain. As we get into Monday, your pass conditions look like this. We'll see marginal to IFR concerns changing there for Anaktuvik Pass and Adigan Pass throughout the day, ending up with IFR as the end of the day goes. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will start at IFR with some improvement toward marginal conditions as we go through the day. IFR is expected to start the day in Rainy Pass as well. Windy Pass may hold at marginal levels throughout the day. Isabel Pass expected to be marginal most of your day, as well as Mentasta Pass. Tonita Pass we expect to see IFR concerns developing as the day goes on, and Portage Pass likely holds at IFR most of your afternoon. Chilkoot and White Pass also looks to stay at IFR concerns most of the Monday. Now for the freezing levels, we expect to see that warm air spreading out a little bit more. Yesterday it was really concentrated in the south. As we get into Monday, it's going to expand a little bit more, but that northern progression is really going to halt. The surface freezing line doesn't seem to change all that much, holding around Haines and Skagway, wrapping around Cordova to Valdez, and then Whittier southward through Seward, just about to Kodiak. And then really no major changes out across the central Aleutians as well, so most of the interior is still well below freezing. Icing concerns are somewhat limited, above 2 to about 5,000 feet for the eastern half of the mainland there. Most of the moisture is really concentrated across east and southeastern Alaska, with freezing levels really climbing up as you get into southeast, anywhere from about 6,000 to 8,000 feet for most areas to find any significant icing concerns. Some of this could occasionally reach into considerable moderate across parts of southeast, so watch for changes from the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit as this weather maker is moving through southeast. Out to the west, drier air is really bringing in no concerns. The jet stream has a pronounced trough across most of western Alaska, and you can see the really rapid flow of air here, 160 to 180 knots rounding the base of this trough. And as that moves into the Pacific Northwest, just slamming into the Seattle area and Portland around 125 knots. So some very active weather coming into there. If you've got any flight plans moving through earlier in the week, they may have some weather issues to contend with there. Across the mainland, we've got a steady southerly flow, though, at 50 knots, and that is keeping moisture in place across the region. You can see that at 9,000 feet. Low pressure in the Gulf, south and easterly flow for southeast, and the mainland anywhere from 15 to 35 knots, and northerlies coming down the west coast here, and no major change at 3,000 feet. 25 to 35 knots there with low pressure entrenched across the mainland, and south and easterly flow coming in through south central, the interior, and southeastern Alaska. Turbulence concerns, though, will continue across southern southeast with some areas of isolated severe above, or below, I should say, 6,000 feet and 4,000 feet and choppy out west. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space, and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat
squished
it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It is just
moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make 1 lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah, you could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
It takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles out. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites, and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot, because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
At the same speed.
Right. The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot.
I see.
And it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture, you can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called. These are stationary in appearance. And they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view, and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures. If you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet. And for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit, which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation. And they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this. And the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there. But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail. The kind of detail, because you're close in.
Very high resolution.
You couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by, and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits. Each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right, okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years. Amazing
it's
stuff.
It's a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on Dehne and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And on to your sea ice update. You'll notice a lot of changes here across the Bering Strait, and we'll continue to watch this area for a great many changes as we go through the next week to come. The Bering Strait is slowly closing off, and you can see marginal ice from Little and Big Diomede southward towards St. Lawrence Island, but a lot of expansive growth around St. Lawrence, around Norton Sound, through Etolin Strait and down towards southwestern Alaska, the Kuskokwim Delta, and even into Bristol Bay. And if you look carefully around Kamishak Bay, there's a little bit of ice here. Also across northern and southern parts of the northern inlet, Turnagain Arm and Kinnick Arm have both seen new ice growth. So a lot of changes there with a continued cold pattern, and as that cold trough shifts eastward, more cold air will be building in, allowing more ice to grow. Check the latest anytime at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Winds are improving across southeastern Alaska. Look for northerlies in Lynn Canal, 15 knots, 3-foot seas there. South and easterly winds across the central and southern passages, 4 to 6-foot seas expected tomorrow. We're still looking at some stronger winds across the outer coast, 25 knots there at their peak, but we will have stronger gusts outside of Craig. Storm force winds and gales are coming down rapidly tonight, so a lot of improvement by tomorrow afternoon. Look for seas to hold around 14 to 15 feet. By the time we get back into Tuesday, another surge of wind is working up the outer coast, so outside of Cross Sound all the way down to Dixon Entrance, 30 to 35 knots with 15 to 20-foot seas expected there on the inside. 4-foot seas in the north, 10-foot seas in the south. A southeasterly wind driving in at 25 to 30 and gusts up to 35 coming out of Lynn Canal with that 4-foot sea on Tuesday. In south central, southerlies in Prince William Sound, 3-foot seas there on the 20-knot wind. South and westerlies coming up Cook Inlet with 6 to 8-foot seas. Over the Barrens, 10 to 12-foot seas with that westerly wind. As we get into Tuesday, not a huge change, but you will see some stronger winds around the Barrens, 30 to 40 knots expected across most of the western Gulf into Prince William Sound. A much better day, 10 knots with 2-foot seas on a northwest wind, and northerlies across the Lynn Canal, or the northern Cook Inlet, I should say, 2-foot seas there, and northwesterlies south of Kenai all the way down toward Homer, 20 knots and 3-foot seas for Tuesday. Now, Bristol Bay, heavy freezing spray is expected across the southern Bering Sea and up the western coast. 30 knots there with 8 to 11-foot seas. For Shelikof Strait, look for gusts to 35 knots on a 25-knot sustained wind. 8-foot seas are expected. 10 to 14-foot seas across the North Pacific coastline with 25 to 30-knot winds. And that pretty much stays the same for all areas as we head into Tuesday. Northwesterlies at 30, 11 to 13-foot seas in the Pacific, and 9 to 11-foot seas across the Bering, when once again heavy freezing spray will be a problem. North and northwesterlies expected for the central and eastern chain, 25 to 30 there, looking at 13 to 15-foot seas for the Pacific and 9 to 11-foot seas for the Bering Sea coast. Look for a west to northwesterly flow out across the western end of the chain for Monday, and as we get into Tuesday, a sharp difference with a strong southerly flow building in, 40 to 50 knots and storm force winds coming into Shemya. Look for 16 to 19-foot seas there and 10 to 11-foot seas across most of the central and eastern chain, with winds changing around to more of a southerly direction as we go into Tuesday night. Look for 13-foot seas north of Nikolsky and Unalaska. For the west coast, heavy freezing spray will be an issue again south of the ice edge. 25 to 30 knots are expected for most areas, with 8 to 9-foot seas generally north and south of Nunivak Island. Ice over Norton Sound will keep northwesterly winds going at 20 knots. As we get into Tuesday, similar conditions, north and northwesterlies about 20 to 30 knots with 8 to 9-foot seas there around St. Paul, St. George, and out toward the Kuskokwim Delta. Northwesterlies let up just a little bit more around Norton Sound at 15 knots, and northerlies over the Bering Strait will continue over St. Lawrence Island with 5-foot seas in open waters. 7-foot seas as you get into the northern parts of Bering Strait for a Monday. Otherwise, everything is listed as ice covered at this point. For the Beaufort Sea, 10 to 15, and for the Chukchi Sea, 10 to 25 knots. They're coming in from the north and northwest. By Tuesday, winds diminish a little bit around the Chukchi, but not that much. Outside of Kotzebue Sound, 25 knots out of the north. And for the Beaufort, west and northwesterlies coming in at 10 to 15 knots for your Tuesday. Once again, northerlies blowing through the Bering Strait, 25 knots with 5-foot seas, and plan on heavy freezing spray in that area. Once again, warnings and advisories have been let up for most of southeastern Alaska as winds continue to improve there. Snow will continue to fall in some areas, especially in the north. Snow for south central is the plan for the rest of the evening and overnight hours. Winter weather advisories for places like Turnagain Pass south to Seward, from Kenai north toward Anchorage. Also looking for Thompson Pass, a winter weather advisory there for snow and blowing snow for the Anchorage area, as well as the Susitna region south of Talkeetna. Everyone looking at least about 3 to as much as 15 inches of snow, with the highest around some of the passes, of course. As the front continues tracking eastward, snow possibilities will continue into early parts of next week, with more rain and snow in southeast and more cold coming down the west coast. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.